All right, welcome back from our first break. So before we get started onto the wings, just a shameless plug. So if you haven't already, feel free to follow us on Twitter at Junkie Sports NBA. And for all those audio listeners out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Overcast and all the other podcasting services right now, we have recently started also doing video platforms of our podcast when you can see us talk as well. And we have some sweet backgrounds right now. David's in space, and Ray Allen is hitting that corner three for the Heat behind me. But that YouTube page is called Junkie Sports Media. So that's Junkie Sports Media for the YouTube, and our Twitter handle is at Junkie Sports NBA. So give us a follow. We'd really appreciate it. And feel free to share with all your other NBA junkies out there. So now going into our wings.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and kick us off for this. So, the first wing I have that I think is going to be the next big thing next season is DeAndre Hunter. He kind of came in this season. He had an all right season. He averaged 12 points a game, but just shot super inefficient from the field. 41% from field, 35% from three. For me, I need to see him improve those numbers, but I think the big thing I'd like to see from him going into next season is just become an absolute defensive monster. I think he really has the opportunity to take very nice defensive matchups to improve his game, especially because Trae Young's just so horrendous on defense. And so I'd really like to see him improve next season because although I don't think they should, I wouldn't at all be surprised to see them pay John Collins the money. And so that means they want Trae Young and John Collins in the future. And so who's going to be that third guy? And I really think it's going to be DeAndre Hunter, and I think he needs to prove himself. And so I'd really like to just see him improve efficiently across the board. He just needs to become that next guy. I think he needs to become a little bit better of a ball handler, create his own offense, not rely as much on Trae Young to do it for him. But I really would like to see him make that next jump into that 16 points per game next season, just becoming really nice and efficient there. And I think he can carve out a really nice role in that team as their sort of third option and defensive monster. And I think that's something that could really become crucial for that Hawks team and move them into the future, and definitely not next year, but in the future, put them in that playoff contention because they're not making the playoffs next year.
No, I think
But
that's
go
a
ahead, Davis.
I think that's a good point, and especially because in general, like you said, they're kind of looking for that wing that's going to be their long-term solution. And so I think between him, Cam Reddish, and Kevin Hoarder, they're all going to kind of realize that going into this situation. I wouldn't be surprised if all those dudes took big leaps just to
Absolutely.
try to, cement themselves as that next player to kind of, help bolster their longevity in the league. My only worry with DeAndre Hunter, though, like obviously he came out of Virginia and was touted as, the next big defensive thing. And we didn't see too much of that so far as it translated to the NBA. And you kind of mentioned some of his shooting concerns as well and efficiency concerns with that. But my biggest issue with him that if he is able to make that next big leap, I think he's going to need to kind of embrace the role of the slasher a little bit more than he currently does. I think too many times he's settling for bad shots that, I mean, I don't know. They're bad shots, and so you shouldn't be taking them. And especially for a guy that doesn't kind of have that, hot hand, doesn't really get super streaky with the shot. I don't know. I think if he could kind of transition his game into a wing, because he's got a big frame. He's very strong and can kind of body some dudes. That's kind of why he's got those defensive tools to kind of, you know, elevate his game or whatever I'm trying to say right now. But I think if he does kind of embrace that slasher role, kind of like Kelly Oubre, then I think he could absolutely make that jump. And I think like I said at the very beginning, like I think all three of those wings are going to be vying for that next long term spot to kind of play alongside that young core. And so, yeah, sure, why not him? And so going on to who I also mentioned, Kelly Oubre. That's my first pick for the wings. Who could be the next big thing? And so Kelly Oubre, he's had a pretty good career so far in the NBA. He's not shied away from having 15 to 20 points per game since his third season in the league. Also, just shout out to some of these nicknames because he's got some pretty sweet nicknames, and I'm just about it. Tsunami Poppy, Wave Poppy, and Shot. But
Yeah,
Tsunami Poppy especially, that's
that's
just
nice.
savage.
That's
That's
very
savage.
nice.
Absolutely. Um, so I mean, he's a guy that hasn't ever really had a ton of success from behind the 3-point line, even though he's, been shooting about five threes a game since his third season. Um, but at the same time, his efficiency has slowly started to creep up there in terms of his 3-point capabilities. And also, I mean, talk about some of these opportunities and kind of a similar situation to what we were just talking about with the Hawks, um, where they have their two stars, right? And they kind of are looking for, okay, who's going to be that other guy that we can keep around for the long term and make something work and have our trio of the future. I mean, they're paying Kelly Oubre because they think he has that next notch in his game. And although he improved from 15 points a game to 19 last season, I still think he has another dimension to his game that we haven't been able to see. And a lot of that comes from if he's been able to work on his 3-point shooting over this offseason, which I think we could see. And especially because the volume has been there from his 3-point opportunities, it's just a matter of if he knocks down one or two more of those each game, he's averaging 24, 26 like now. And so I know he's had some issues in the past with injury and whatnot, but I don't think that's too big of a concern. It was just really a last season type of thing for a couple games. But at the same time, I mean, I don't know, he's got the swagger, he's got the moxie. He's a fun player to watch. The fans in Phoenix love him. And so I think he's kind of, looking at his whole situation with Phoenix and, he's trying to prove to not only himself, but also to that front office that he's, a guy that can play right alongside D-Book and DeAndre Ayton for the next, 5-7 seasons.
Yeah, so I think Kelly Oubre is a nice player. I think he's a good fit alongside DeAndre Ayton, Devin Booker out there in Phoenix, but I just don't see him making a jump. I think like where he's at right now, that's all we're going to see. And I think that's nice. I think that's a good option on that team. I think he's a great third option behind those other two players I just mentioned, but I just don't see him improving on anything else so drastic that I see him making that next jump, that huge leap in the next season, becoming that next big thing. It's not something I see coming from him. Like, as you said, like the volume's there, but the efficiency's not. To me, that's more of a concern that he's taking bad shots. I mean, he's taking all these threes and he's not making them. And to me, that's just poor shot selection. But I think he's a good player. I think he's really, really fun to watch, as you said. And I think he's a good fit there. It's just I don't see him making some sort of jump. I see if anyone on that team's going to make a jump in next season, it's going to be eating up more of those shots and over Kelly Oubre. And so I don't see Kelly Oubre going over 20 points at all in the next season at all.
Really? So you're saying that he's not capable of improving because we haven't seen it in the past. But
Not
if we're
necessarily. I
looking
don't.
at
I don't necessarily like. He can improve. He might become more efficient from three, but I don't think like we might see his 3-point shot efficiency improve. But I don't think it's going to be reflected, especially in the point category. I don't see. I think he's going
what
to
if you knock
regress
down more threes, doesn't that translate to more points?
less shots. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't think he's going to get as many shots next season. I think there's going to be more pieces on that team that they're going to try and work into that offense and give more opportunities to. And I don't think he's
They're
going to. I
paying
think
him
he's
a
going to be the one they're
bag
going to
though.
lose opportunities from.
I don't know about that because he's currently getting a little bit of a bag from Phoenix. And so they're not going to just go away from him for no reason, especially when he had a good season last season. And I mean, if we're talking about like points per game and like, his through his 6 seasons. So he started off rookie year, 3.5 points, 6.5, 11.8, 15, and now 19. Like that seems like if this is the stock market, he's booming up, right? And so I don't know. I don't think it's beyond the like
All I gotta
cusp of
say
the
is
imagination
COVID
to
just
say.
happened. If we're saying he's a stock, then he's about to crash for next season. So I just wanted to play a little wordplay there, but I truly don't expect. Like, I would be genuinely surprised if he was 20 points or more next season. I genuinely would.
He had more attempts on Phoenix. So he's played 2 seasons with Phoenix, right? And from last season to this past, or from 2 seasons ago to this last season, he not only had more like regular field goal attempts, but also 3-point attempts. And so I'm not saying that, 2 points is all of a sudden a trend, but I still think, especially given the contract situation, and yes, I know Cam Johnson is probably going to be competing for some of these minutes, especially after the nice bubble that he had, and he's, a good little young piece they're going to want to continue developing. But at that same time, he's a fan favorite. And so sometimes these fan favorites will, kind of get a little bit more playing time just because, I mean, as it's kind of obvious, like the fans want to see him play.
I don't know.
I,
I think there's so many other pieces that they're gonna want to give opportunities. I mean, you said Cam Johnson. They have the lottery pick this year. DeAndre Ayton's improving. Aaron Baines is going to be in that offense. He was nice when DeAndre Ayton was out at the beginning of the year. I just think there's
Baines is I. Baines is
other
I.
pieces and opportunities that they want to get moving in that offense. And I still think Kelly Oubre Jr. can absolutely and will be the third option on this team. But I think DeAndre Ayton needs to be their number 2. And so I think they're going to have him eclipse into that 20-point plus category. And Kelly Oubre, I think although he will become more efficient, I think he's probably going to regress to more of a 17 points per game next season.
Okay, I still think that's okay. Okay,
I mean,
we're
time
good.
will tell. We'll see next season how it works out. But I'm gonna go ahead and go into my second wing. Big time player. But again, it's a specific reason why I have him picked. So I have Jason Tatum. And the reason why I have him picked is because I think Brad Stevens is going to go to Jason Tatum, especially after the playoffs that happened and their loss to the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals, and say, you need to be averaging over 25 a game next season at minimum. Otherwise, we're not going to get there. We're not going to get to the championship. We're not going to be able to compete. And I think he's the guy that needs to be there. I think they really need to. I think Brad Stevens needs to relook at their offense and look at ways to try and go out of their way to include Jason Tatum and get him more opportunities to get the ball into the hoop. I think, especially in these playoffs, Jason Tatum had a couple games where he was just absolutely horrendous in the first half, came back in the second half, played a lot better. But I think for him, it's about being aggressive early and not relying on that 3-point shot too often. Although he's a great 3-point shooter, I think a lot of times when he relies on it and he's not aggressive, that's when he has poor games. And so I look into next season and just expect him to improve on just being as aggressive as possible. He also started showing glimpses of incredible passing here in the playoffs. And so I kind of want them to move forward with him as sort of an equivalent ball handler to Kemba. Obviously Kemba's their point guard, but I really like to see Jason Tatum bring the ball up more and run their offense a little bit and sort of be that point forward, a little bit of a role. I think that's going to give them a lot more opportunities. And I also kind of look to see them potentially moving away from Gordon Hayward. I love him as a player, but I just think for the contract and what they're getting and what they need to do with this roster, I'd love to see them maybe move away from him this offseason. And I think that'll just give Jason Tatum more opportunities, because the only way the Celtics are going to compete for a championship in my eyes is if Jason Tatum's averaging minimum 25 points a game. Because this season, I think he averaged about 22 and a half, 23. He needs to be over 25 consistently. I'd like to see it be more in that 27 range, but I'd like to hear what you have to think about that, though.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know we kind of talked about it in this past, specifically in the playoffs when when we were kind of debating if the Celtics are capable of making that next step. And to some extent, a lot of the zeitgeist around our argument was that this team has been spreading their points out too much between their, Jaylen Brown, Kemba, and him. Well, that was specifically when Gordon Hayward was still out with injuries, but I kind of agree with you. I don't know if Hayward's going to be there next season. I know he's been rumored with a couple teams and whatnot, but at the same time, I think it would bode well for them to move away from Gordon Hayward so that they can try to, allow these other three to kind of make that next big step and be the next big thing. Um, do I think Jason Tatum has the tools to make it happen? Absolutely. But I also think Kemba Walker and Jaylen Brown have that same skill set to make that happen as well. And so it's hard for me to like make a like sound argument saying Jason Tatum specifically should be that guy when we've seen how lethal and how effective Kemba Walker's been in that offense and the improvements that Jaylen Brown continues to make from season to season. I think it's just a three-headed monster going forward, and they can live and die by that. I don't necessarily know if without Gordon, when Gordon Hayward's out of that system, that offers more opportunities for Marcus Smart or Grant Williams or some of these other guys to kind of step up and have some meaningful minutes. And I don't know. I just don't necessarily think that the Celtics are going to be asking that of Jason Tatum because Jason Tatum is going to already be, making that improvement by himself. So I don't necessarily think that conversation needs to take place between the Celtics and Jason Tatum for that to happen. Also, like getting blocked by Bam, he might just never come back to the league.
Oh
He
yeah.
might not. So, I mean, we'll see if he plays at all next season, actually.
I mean, I just don't think he's going to go into next. I think the reason why they're going to ask him of that and have him do that going into next season is because this last season, as we said, I mean, Jaylen Brown, Kemba Walker, Jason Tatum, they all averaged over 20, and they still didn't get there. And I think they need to have that pecking order of who's top dog, who's the second guy, and who's the third guy. I think that's their issues. They really don't know that. They don't have that listed. I mean, listed, but you know what I mean? I think they need to have Jason Tatum be that clear cut. He's our go-to guy because a lot of times, I mean, down the stretch, it's who's dribbling the ball up the court right now because that's the guy who they're going to. And I don't think that's how it should work. I think they need to focus a lot more on that pecking order and really say Jason Tatum's our guy. Kemba Walker's our 2, Jaylen Brown's our 3. And I think a big part of that's going to be moving away from Gordon Hayward and restructuring that offense slightly to give Jason Tatum a little bit more opportunity and have him be a little bit more of a ball handler, have him almost go into that Gordon Hayward role. Because Gordon Hayward a lot of times would run their offense. And so I'd like to see Jason Tatum have that opportunity more because I think he can create for others because he draws so much attention from the defense and really open up the floor for other players.
But if he's the one taking the ball up the court, which we haven't seen a lot of from Jason Tatum so far, and I mean that doesn't make sense to me a whole lot, and I don't think Brad Stevens will kind of be utilizing that either because then from that aspect, it seems like a little waste of the space in the court with having Jaylen Brown and Kemba not bringing it up and kind of opening up the lane because the eyes are more on Jason Tatum on the wing. I just feel like that's not like a smart offensive scheme because he's not Giannis. He's not a guy that's just able to dominate every time down the court. Like we've seen some problems with Jason Tatum, especially in the playoffs. Whenever they were rolling against the Heat, that he had that first half. I don't remember if it was Game 5 or whatnot, but he had like 2 points in the first half, and then he came back in the second half and was on a tear. But when he does have these offensive woes and is kind of slow to start, because in general it seems like he's been a slower starting player than a lot of people in this league, where he'll kind of his first quarter he's kind of just kind of getting the feel for the team, seeing the matchups, reading different things. But then, come second, third, fourth quarter, he starts, blazing it up, tearing it. And so not that I don't think he's capable of it. Like I said, like I think he is, but I don't think Brad Stevens is going to be saying this is our clear pecking order because also if you look at it, like why would Brad Stevens do that? Does he like how would that bode for what Jaylen Brown and Kemba think of their roles on the team? Because right now I think they probably take pride in the fact that we have 3 guys on any given night that can beat your team.
But that clearly didn't work, and that's my issue is it didn't work in these playoffs, and this is the
Just
this
because it
was
was
the
these just because it
this
was
is
these
their best
playoffs though.
opportunity to go compete for a championship in a long time. They didn't have to go face the Bucks. They had to face the Miami Heat. And
But
not
this
saying
is
the
also
Miami
the
Heat didn't
bubble.
deserve it to be there, but at the same time, they had that was the series for them to lose. And clearly, I think if you don't win the championship, that there is something you need to change because it clearly didn't work out. And so it doesn't have to be anything drastic, but I think for this team, I think they need to have that pecking order, and I think they need to ask more of Jason Tatum. And if he doesn't have it going some night, absolutely. I mean, obviously, Kemba Walker and Jaylen Brown need to step up, but I think Jason Tatum needs to be their guy. And I think asking more of him and asking him to sort of be the alpha on this team is what they need to do to sort of be more competitive and have a better chance at winning the title.
I just don't think going into this season, their mindset as a franchise was championship or bust. And if we don't win the championship or get there, then, we try switching up all these things because they have such a young core that's, they're working, they're gelling, they're still learning together. And right now, yes, they're looking at acquiring a big in this free agency or via trade through Gordon Hayward. And I think that in and of itself will put them right into championship consideration. I don't think they need to be asking, their big three monster to be switching it up a whole lot because they got to the Eastern Conference Finals. You can call that a loss for your franchise if you want, but if I'm the Celtics, I'm still pretty happy with how the season ended, especially with it being a bubble circumstance where, they don't get to play in their home court around the fans. The Celtics have typically been one of the better franchises playing at home, especially in the playoffs. And I mean, there's just a lot of X factors that go into, the mindset of the players being in the bubble, just a whole lot of different things that, we can't really fully understand at this point, but, there'll be some good books and whatnot later on in life, about this whole bubble experience. But I mean, we were talking a little bit, should the bubble have an asterisk? And, you can say whatever you want, but the fact that you're even asking that question, in my opinion, should at least throw some red flags or some warnings up that, okay, this is not regular circumstances. There's some weird stuff happening, obviously. And you can't just say going into the season that was a championship or bust team because they're not.
But I don't think it's necessarily bust. I think I mean, if you don't win the championship, a change needs to happen. To
Yeah.
me, championship or bust means you're blowing up your team if you don't win a championship. And I don't
Don't
think that's what they're doing here. I just think they're making small, minor changes to the way they play on the offensive end. And I think these changes are going to help them improve.
But I think their player, like their game flow and their like team chemistry is fine. The problem with them has been their roster composition, the lack of a dominant or a somewhat serviceable big man. And so I think they can address a lot of these issues and concerns and help elevate their team a lot more, not by requiring more and trying to establish a pecking order from the big three, but rather by just going after and finding a decent big that they can put in there. And I think that immediately puts them right up there with the Nets to kind of be the front runners in the East.
I mean, yeah, I just think, obviously a big man's going to help them, but at the same time, like, that means they're going to have an elite big man, an elite point guard, an elite shooting guard, an elite small forward. Like, at that point, yeah, like their roster's stacked, but I think they should have been, I think they had the players on their roster to make the championship, and they didn't do it. And I don't think a big man going in there is going to more help. I'm not necessarily help them, but like I think it's just going to be that you're going to start running into the issue of that's another person in the locker room who wants shots. That's their issue right now. Is they have so many people on that roster that are very good players, and they all want shots. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've been saying that they need to move away from Gordon Hayward, um, because I think they need to move his shots to their better players. And I think Jason Tatum's that guy, and that's why I want to see him make that jump. But why don't you go ahead and give us your next wing?
I do have one more thing to add just because I was rewatching that Bam Adebayo block just a couple of days ago, and like the last like 5 minutes of that game, if Daniel Tice doesn't take 2 threes late down that stretch, I mean, because especially the Heat were like letting Tice they were giving him so much space on the offensive side, specifically behind the arc, and from just someone watching the game, I'm just saying okay, if the Celtics need to win this, please do not take this shot. And here he just, tosses it up, whatever, just brick after brick.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't take those shots, then they probably win game one. And if they win game one, that whole series probably plays out differently, in my opinion. So I don't want to put the whole thing on, okay, Daniel Tice was taking some threes that he shouldn't have. But I mean, it's the same thing that if we're looking at the Rockets and, some of their issues against, the Lakers, Russell Westbrook should not have been shooting some of the threes that he was, and that kind of cost him the series early on. And so, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to peg it all on Daniel Tice because he's decent, he's serviceable, but at the same time, his bad shot selection in game one, in my opinion, was what lost him the game. So I don't know. I will go into my next wing for you though. So I already said Kelly Oubre. Wow, that was a long tangent. So my next one is Michael Porter Jr. So we'll try to keep these a little shorter going forward. But talking about, I mean, this is kind of a guy like John Morant that I don't know if we need to dwell on too much because I think everyone kind of sees the opportunity there. And especially now that he's been, staying healthy for a longer period of time, is getting slowly more integrated into this offense and finding his role on the team. He's a guy that's definitely capable of making that next big leap. With him, I think the only thing that he needs to make that next big leap is just more minutes on the court. And I think he'll be getting that next season, especially after, finding a lot of success in the postseason. The thing that he needs to be working on to make sure that he's keeping those minutes, especially late in the game, is just his defensive capabilities, because you saw a lot of teams in the playoffs that anytime they were going down the court, they would just
Expose him.
attack on MPJ. And so they had to pull him out late in the games because they just couldn't afford those easy shots they were giving up. And you saw the same thing with Duncan Robinson and the Heat. And so, I mean, I definitely think Michael Porter Jr. is a guy that could be an all-star in this league. I don't think that's like a wild take. Just he needs to continue staying healthy and get more minutes, and I think it'll come.
Yeah. So I think he definitely has the potential to go and be a great player in this league. Honestly, the main reason why I didn't have him on my list is because I don't see him being able to have the opportunity next season on the Denver Nuggets to make that massive jump statistically, just because they already have their starting five. I mean, the reason why he was able to get those opportunities in the bubble in the playoffs is because they had two of their starters injured, and so that's just the only concern I have. I think the talent, the skill level is there. I think he has the ability to improve, but that was my main concern, is just him getting those minutes in the next season.
I mean, the only reason I'm not concerned about him getting those minutes is that, Denver was already really close this year and they exceeded expectations in the playoffs, similar to the Heat. And I think when you look at it from that perspective, I mean, it was on the back of Jamal Murray and the heroics of Nikola Jokic. But at the same time, I don't think they would have been capable of making that same run 2 seasons ago without Michael Porter Jr. And I think, I mean, the look
I
on your
don't think
face says you
Michael Porter Jr.
disagree.
is the reason why they made this run,
He
without a
definitely,
doubt.
he definitely helped them.
It didn't hurt them, but I think if you have Grant and Will Barton 100% healthy for the entirety of the playoffs, I don't think Michael Porter Jr. would have blown anyone away.
Will Barton's not a guy, in my opinion, that can win you games. I think Michael Porter Jr. is.
I disagree. I think Will
Like,
Barton still brings a lot to that team. I think there's a reason why he was their starter and Michael Porter Jr. wasn't. I think Michael Porter Jr. has the capability to be better than Will Barton without a doubt, but I don't think right now Michael Porter Jr. is gonna. They're not gonna just be like, "Hey, you're our starting small forward or power forward, whatever they want to call him now," and say you're our starting guy in the next season. I see him more going into their 6-man role and coming off the bench with Plumlee, because honestly, somehow it works between them two. It actually looks weirdly good watching them play. I don't know what it is, but that's what I kind of see for them. I see him more going into that 6-man role, maybe giving him opportunities off the bench, but I think for him to make a massive jump, he's got to be in that starting lineup, and I just think they have too many hens in the hen house in that starting lineup, and so I don't see him breaking into that.
all right, it's fair.
So I'm gonna go ahead and list off my last wing. So from the New York Knicks, I got RJ Barrett, kind of going along with like Ja Morant. For him, it's just he's got all the opportunity in the world to succeed out there. He really struggled at the beginning of the year, but he sort of started to figure it out as he went along. And I think he's just gonna have a great season next year. Currently averaged 14 points a game. Obviously, his big concern, as it always is with rookies, is just efficiency. He was horrendous from the field, 40% from the field, 30% from three. And so I just really like to see him improve on those areas. And also, I'd really like to see him continue in that point forward role that they sort of moved him in through later on in the season. Because, I mean, his turnover and assist ratio is terrible right now. It's like almost 1-to-1. And so I think for him overall, it's all about efficiency, both scoring and protecting the ball. I just think he needs to become a lot better on that end. But I mean, he's got all the opportunity of the world out there in New York, and so that's why I kind of have him as my third wing on my list.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a safe bet. I mean, he's definitely given the reins to the team without a doubt, and he's going to be their guy going forward. We'll see who they end up drafting. I think that, if they get a good facilitator of,
Complimentary
and
piece
yeah,
to him,
just
yeah,
someone that's a playmaker alongside him that, has some decent vision, kind of take some of the responsibility off of RJ Barrett. Because last season, watching those Knicks games, it felt like RJ Barrett just had the weight of the world on his shoulders because
yeah,
there wasn't any help like anywhere near him outside of Mitchell Robinson, who I'll get to later.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I think that's a good bet, and I'd like to see RJ make that next step as well. So my final wing for the next big thing is Andrew Wiggins, previously number one overall pick. Touted as the next LeBron James coming into the 2014 draft. But at the same time, right, we've been talking a lot about opportunity, and people that are poised to take advantage of that opportunity in specific. And Andrew Wiggins seems, I mean, we've talked about this whole Warriors situation a little bit in the past, so I don't want to dwell on it too long. But assuming they don't trade Andrew Wiggins in this offseason, not having that load of responsibility, trying to carry the Minnesota Timberwolves year after year after year with these high expectations and whatnot, he's going to be able to settle down behind Clay and Steph. And, hopefully, I think if there's anyone that's going to be able to maximize his potential that he had coming into the league, the Golden State Warriors, are, one of the premier franchises. Them, the Raptors, and the Celtics are probably the best at developing some of their young players, in my opinion. And so, I mean, Andrew Wiggins is still very young. I don't know how old he is off the top of my head. Um, but I don't know. I definitely do think he's capable of making that next big leap. But a lot of it comes with, in my opinion, having a lot of the responsibility off his shoulders. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly couldn't have said it any better. He was someone I almost put on my list as well. And I think for him in the next season, as you said, just having that responsibility taken away from him, I mean, he's going to be the best third option in the NBA next year. And so I think really recognizing that he doesn't have to do it all and that he's got these two other elite shooters in NBA history alongside him, I think he's really going to be able to do what he does best and not have to worry about all aspects of the game. And so I think that's going to really help him improve in the next season. And I think if there's any organization in the NBA that can fold him in and make it work with him and make him work with their system, it's the Golden State Warriors without a doubt. And I mean, they made it work with two top five players who always need the ball, and Kevin Durant, Steph. They had Clay, Draymond. I mean, I think they're going to definitely be able to make it work with Andrew Wiggins if they keep him. And so, yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's that opportunity is there for him for sure.
So, who do you
So
have for your last win?
I already did my three. I went first this
Oh,
round, so I already have my three there. So
perfect. And with that, we're going to go into our final break and then wrap it up with some of our bigs.